You're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast. My name is Mark Hunter, the Sales Hunter. And today we're talking about hey, your price is too high. How many times have you heard that from a customer? I'd love to buy from you, but you're just going to have to cut your price. Hey, today we got the solution. The solution, Joe Adeeser. Hey, he is a former agency owner. He knows a tremendous amount about price. So why am I talking? Let's get the show going right now.
You're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast with Mark Hunter, where the focus is to help you as a salesman sell with confidence and integrity. And now here's your host.
Yes, we're going to solve all of your pricing woes right here today. So welcome, Joe. Welcome to the show. Thank you.
Hey, Mark. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, here's the thing. You got like 21 minutes left to convince us that price is not an issue. No, let's break this down further. Why do we stumble over price? Why do we have that issue? We as salespeople, we as agencies, we as businesses, because you've got a great software solution for professional services, which helps people sell at a more robust price. So that's really cool. Right. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that at the end. But why do people struggle with price?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of reasons. One comes to mind is associating value with the actual price that you're giving, right? So I'm in the interactive proposal world, and a big challenge that folks can have is they just have a very limited amount of clarity on what they're offering, and then a big price point, right? And so it's really hard as the prospect to see the value and what I'm actually getting for it.
Well, okay, so let's break that whole thing down, because I firmly believe it's not that your price is too high, it's just that you haven't demonstrated enough value. Right. How do we get that to line up better? How do we get that to work right?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm a big fan. So I had an agency for 12 years. And there was this secret that I stumbled onto, Mark, about, I'd say 5 or 6 years in. And the idea is to productize your offering. I think for a lot of service-based companies, a lot of agencies, you're just kind of throwing together proposals, grabbing from here, grabbing from there. And I think what's really key, especially when you're talking about getting the value across your prospect, is to slow down and start building a catalog of your services. Okay, you might not sell physical products, but I bet it's not different. That service isn't different each time. And so, you can clarify what's included in it, limitations, etc.
Now, let me push back on that a little bit, because it almost feels like then we're pushing too much product feature. And, does that get us into trouble? Or walk me through how this works.
Yeah, it certainly can. I'd say there's two ditches, right? You don't want on one side the vague vortex, and you don't want the other side where you're so granular, no one wants to hang out with you, right? And so I typically, to kind of high level with this idea, imagine each of your service offerings as a line item, okay? That's the process of systematizing, building out reusable items, okay? I like this format. So I'll start a line item. I'll say, let's say social media management. Let's say you offer that service. I usually start a line item with a summary sentence, so describing the big idea of the social media management. Then I like to say work included, followed by a bulleted list. Okay. The bulleted list is fun for you as the business owner because you're thinking through your business and you can do it quickly. It's easy for your prospect to scan. And tying this back, Mark, it's a lot easier to price things when I can, add up the smaller pieces and figure out the level of effort. So then finally adding to that, I like to put limitations and then upsells. Now you can't be, again, don't make a 30 bulleted list of features, right? Don't do that. But you also don't want to just say, hey, I'll manage your social media for $1,000 a month. You're asking for paying either side.
Well, you bring up a good point, because if you list too many, then it's like you're walking into a Chinese restaurant,
right? And
you have this whole list of things and people pick and choose. But at the same token, if you don't spell it out, we get into what I refer to as project creep. I mean, how many times do you quote a price and somebody says agree, but the problem is what they're agreeing to is different than what you're agreeing to.
Right.
And then nothing comes together well.
Yep. And you're making minimum wage again, right? Why is this happening?
Really?
Again?
Oh.
The goal is define it enough so that it's clear what the spirit of the work is. I don't have to bring up the contract and say, well, it said only, I'm only going to respond to 7 comments on this social media management thing. Right? That's not the point. The point is this is clearly not 3x of this. Right?
Yeah.
Enough so that you have the spirit and some handles to grab onto so that you can't get killed with scope creep.
Okay, now, so I list these things out, but where do I tie it back to the outcome? Because again, if I'm just selling products, but I got to match it to this is the solution that the customer's looking for. Where does that come into in terms of price?
Flesh that. I want to give a really good answer. Give me a little more there.
Well, I mean, I can list out all of these social media items.
Right.
I'm going to do. And for somebody who has a startup company with no budget, no money, it means one thing. However, if it's to a major corporation that is selling, $60 million, units to a very select target, the outcomes they're looking for are different. So when we say social media management, it's going to take on different meanings. Where does that come into play in terms of determining the price?
Yeah, I think the context is super important, right? So you're going to spend a lot more time outlining something for a bigger job like that. The limitations are more important because the pain is worse if I fail, right?
Bingo.
I would almost in that case have 2 separate line items. One that's more for enterprise level, and then one that's more for smaller companies. But either way, you need to manage expectations, right? Being clear about what you're promising or not promising, being clear about schedules, those kind of things can help make sure that the ship's going in the right direction as far as outcomes.
Yeah. Now, you were very successful with your agency, and you've got this software package that you sell, and clients love it, customers love it. What's made it? Because again, price. Everybody cringes.
Yeah.
When they're asked to put price on the table, they just cringe. Does this help take the cringiness, if that's a technical term, out of the whole pricing thing?
Yeah, it does. I like to say, proposal writing can be fun when you use a system like what I've developed. And the reason why is I'm either building out line items and I'm working on my business. I really enjoy that, right? What I could sell this, or I could cross promote this, or I could have this upsell inside of this line item. That's really fun. Everyone gets engaged with that. And you're either doing that or you're executing. And when you're executing with a system like this, you're just adding modules together. Think of your line items as Legos that you're just adding together on the project. You're not thinking about price 1,000 times because you've already thought about that, right? So I think that's, again, getting back to this idea of productize your offering, build a system so that you're not you shouldn't be having massive surprises and having to rethink through things every time that you create a proposal.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of akin this to the old radio. And do we still listen to terrestrial radio? But when they had a rate card, they'd have, and newspapers had that, print advertising had a rate card that if you want X, this is what you're going to pay, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But it's interesting because we're getting some comments in here, and Crispin Cruz, he jumps in and he says, seems completely counterintuitive to the consultative sale. So I'd imagine you're not putting this on the table anytime soon in the selling process. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm really big into what I call the proposal review meeting. And so the idea is you have a sales discovery call. On that call, you you book a meeting from a meeting to review the proposal. So 20-minute proposal review meeting is the next step in the process. I really like what I would typically do is I would create a proposal using what Smart Pricing Table was. It wasn't that 6 years ago when we used it, but essentially that software. And I would then review the scope of work with the prospect on that proposal review meeting, which is really great because I can overcome objections. I can answer questions. I can actually dial in prices, right? Do you want this particular thing for your blog or your marketing effort or whatever it is? And they leave the meeting thinking, well, I've got this like ready to go proposal that they can then review with their team on the other side.
Do you find that this speeds up the sales process or slows it down or what?
Yeah, well, inevitably it speeds it up because if you can reduce back and forth and you can get answers quickly, because again, all I'm pitching here is think through things, in a separate thread and then sell them, right? So when you do that, your proposal writing goes a lot quicker. So instead of getting it out a week later, you can get it out same day in many cases. And the interactivity allows your customer or your prospect to have less back and forth. I also think it builds trust. When a prospect has some control, I'm not saying ultimate, but some control over price and scope, I think it's really empowering for them, and it builds trust, and you can many times close quicker because of that.
Okay. Well, one of the techniques that I love to use is to give the customer a feeling like they have some control. So I might give them two options. Here's option A and here's option B.
Right.
Option A is a very high priced one. And then, I almost let them choke and gag on it. Right. And then I give them option B, which is probably the one. Now I'm giving away the solution to how any prospective clients don't listen to this. No. But then I put plan B on the table, which is more likely what I think they're going to take.
Right.
Does that work? Does that work with your process?
Yeah, I think that's the product Smart Pricing Table can do a lot of different setups. You can disclose a lot of the pricing. You can hide some of it with different techniques, but you can also have option A, option B, option C kind of stuff. And I find that personally. Personal story. I had an electrician quote recently, and I wanted that very thing, right? It's fun. It's always fun to be on the receiving side of something that you do. And I felt so frustrated that you're telling me I have to call you and get you to part that out and do like a second quote. Well, it's just adding friction to things. So wherever you can, if it's a scenario like that, adding packages or options, I think is huge.
So in other words, you're really allowing the customer to really sense that they have control of the pricing process.
Right.
Right. Walk me through, and does this have the salesperson giving up control of margin? Because again, it's whatever I sell on the top line is fine, but really what I take to the bank, that's what really counts. So how does this help me as a professional services company control my margin?
Yeah, well, I think you need to use optionality sparingly, right? If you don't want it to go under 20K on a particular project, then don't have so many options that they could get down there. So each setup, you have to really think through that. But that's the great thing is it's most of it can be fixed in just a few options, or you can have a lot of options. Because for some people, it's like I'd rather this be a 10K project than lose the project, right? Versus a 20K. Is so long as I've been methodical, and as they deselect stuff, they're deselecting scope and effort. I used to tell prospects, I don't care if you buy a $10,000 website from me or 10,000. You just fill out, you click the things that make sense for you, and we'll make you a great product. And I found that worked extremely well.
Cool. One of the things as I'm looking through this and thinking through what we're talking about, that this can help with a land and expand strategy. I can land you with one particular service and then turn around and expand you. Is that something you propose?
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. And one of the cool things about Smart Pricing Table is the ability to add. I always had a section that said additional items for consideration. I throw 3 or 4 items in there based on my intuition, based on the sales call. And I was always surprised at how many times they'd select those. Okay. But even if they don't, many times they would phase to them, right? Or I've planted a seed for a service maybe they didn't even know that I offered, right? So just getting it out there has power.
I love that, because I think so many times salespeople leave so much on the table because they don't put it in front of the customer and don't tee
Right.
it up. I mean, I always say the only good sale is the one that leads to the next sale.
Right.
And
Right.
if I can't plant the seeds in this initial sale, and again, I don't feel we close sales. We open relationships, and when we
Right.
open relationships, it's amazing. We open relationships by having the customer invest with us, and we in turn are going to deliver them a service back. Help me, walk me through, when would you put this out in front of the customer? In other words, we'll say that you and I have not met, okay, and for one reason or another, we happen to be talking, and you want to sell your professional services to me, and
Right.
look at it. How much information do you feel you need to get before you begin thinking about putting price on the table?
Yeah. Well, I would want to have probably anywhere from a 30 to 60-minute sales call. I'm not saying
Okay.
this works for every industry, but that's how I've done it. And I
Mhm.
did it at my agency. And then I would ask, I'd ask questions a lot around scope. What are you wanting? What are some of your goals? I like scattering in questions like, what's the decision making process in this? What would happen if this project doesn't happen? Those are kind of interesting, telling questions. But then I try to understand the overall scope. The great thing is, if you have a flexible modular system where you're creating proposals, you don't have to know everything, right? You can take some of these things that you think they might want or might be interested, and you can just add them to the bottom of the proposal as potential options.
Okay.
But I'm a big fan of, whenever possible, don't throw a proposal over the fence. I want the chance not to just give my prospect the proposal. I want to sell the stinking thing, right? If I want to put work into it, I want to show them, I want to connect the dots for them. Here's why I set up this way. Here's some things to think about. This is a really cool feature that we've been doing a lot lately. You should consider it. Very interactive, and really you're actually giving them the proposal after they have already reviewed it with you. So you'll never get as much. What I found is you'll never get as much involvement and interaction with the proposal than when you go through it with them.
I tell you what, I love what you're talking about there, that you don't just throw it over, but you're first having that conversation. Because if we have a good, valid conversation, and I understand where you're coming from and I understand what your needs are, the proposal almost becomes secondary, because you really, truly understand. One of the things that I like about this conversation is, and I see this so often with salespeople, they get this prospect, it's a qualified prospect, they're moving them through, and then they just stumble and fall. Like this evening, I'm going to have to put together a proposal for a major opportunity I am working on, and I'm very clear, very defined, because we've done our homework. But I remember years ago when I first began my company, putting together a proposal like that would be an arduous project, and it would take me days to do. And tonight I'll knock it out in about 30 minutes, 45 minutes max. So I see this as delivering confidence to the salesperson.
Right.
Now, what happens when the customer pushes back? You put this on the table, you're discussing it, and the customer says, I can't buy into this. It's way too high. How do you respond then?
Yeah, well, if you have a PDF, that's just a wall of text, Mark, you don't do anything. You just crawl in a hole, right? If you've broken things out, then you can ask questions like, what are the most important things for you? You can consider your actual cost, because even you've got the requirements in front of you, and you can kind of think, is there potential where we could go down on price a little bit? Ultimately, I'm a big fan of, like, if it doesn't work, great. But I'm very slow to take my price down. I used to tell people, look, I'm okay with going down 10%, but we'd have to lower the scope as well.
Thank you. Thank you. You are preaching my language, because I'll tell you what, when salespeople go and cut their price and don't take anything off the table, you've really told the customer that they would have been a stupid fool to buy it at full price.
Right.
So, I mean, I'll cut my price, but something has to come off the table, because otherwise I lose all integrity.
Yeah. And I'm not running a non-for-profit or a nonprofit, right? Like
Thank you.
I've got to, if I'm not continually growing, I've got a team whose morale's dipping. I have my own morale, right? I've got to be paid for what I do. And if I just reduce scope, then I can get other customers to fill that gap, and I don't ruin my revenue potential for the month.
Yeah, this whole conversation, this is really getting good here, because the key is profit's a beautiful thing. I need it to run my business, and the customer also. I mean, we all look at things that we can go to Starbucks and you pay $16.45 for a grande cup of coffee these days, but people willingly do it.
Yeah.
When they could literally walk next door to McDonald's or Waffle House or anything like that and pay $1.19.
Right.
But somehow they're paying 16 because there's a value perception.
Right.
So it really does come down to that whole value perception. Now, it's interesting. Crispin jumps in here again, and he says, no letter opening events. Don't throw the proposal over the fence. And that brings up a comment that I heard years ago, that you always attach legs to a proposal. In other words, I'm going to send you the proposal. We're going to have a conversation on it. We are going to have a conversation.
Right.
It feels like that's absolutely key with kind of the strategy that you recommend here.
Yeah, I think so. And I also would say, like, if someone's not willing to meet with you for a short 20-minute proposal meeting, I'd ask the question, what does that mean? Right?
Thank you.
You just talked to me for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, but you can't give me another 20 minutes. I need to know if, in my head, I'm thinking, I need to know if they're serious, because I have lots of opportunities and I don't want to waste time as a salesperson. Right? So I think that's a good question. Just if they won't take the meeting, then it's telling you something.
Well, it means all they're doing is they're looking for your price to use it against you, because they're going to use it with somebody else.
Right. Right. But if they have to go to a meeting, a lot of times they will. Right. Yeah. And then they do get the price, but then they're also like, wow, no one's doing it like this.
Right.
No one, it looks like you've done this before, right? Because they see the clarity in the proposal and the options, and they think you've done this before. You're not just, I get so many proposals where it's just like, what is this?
Right.
Like,
right.
No clarity.
Where it's this round number, $10,000.
Yeah.
There's something magical about $9,862.45. Wow, they really thought through the number. No, not
there you
really.
Go. There you go.
Hey, we are running out of time here. How do people get in touch with you? Because you've got this product smart pricing table. You got 20 seconds. Tell us how people get in touch with you.
Smartpricingtable.com. I love doing demos. If this sounds interesting, the idea of productizing your offering, schedule a demo today. I also have a free guide, The Profitable Proposal Blueprint, smartpricingtable.com.
Terrific. Hey, our guest today, Joe Adeeser, and really talking about pricing. My name is Mark Hunter, the Sales Hunter. What is the Sales Hunter podcast all about? It's really about giving you 2 episodes each week. One, a short one, where I just dive into a single topic, just me, and a second episode, a longer one, with an expert diving deeper into a topic like we've had here today with Joe. The Sales Hunter podcast is about insights that you can use, because what is sales all about? It's about helping others see and achieve what they did not think was possible. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.